Awesome spirit, guys. Good morning. Woo! More donuts. We need more donuts. Can I hear some more? Some more noise. Woo! Yeah! You're sitting in one of the best tracks. And we have some great speakers lined up. All right, guys, come on. The three of us are a little more interesting than your mobile phones at the moment, right? So you can look up? Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Woohoo! Yeah, I like the spirit. All right, so welcome to the Organize and Track track. So I am Megha Sarathi. I'm going to be your MC for this track. We've seen that, obviously, the way teams manage work, prioritize work, projects, be it large, small, medium-sized, everything has changed, right? Tools just play part of the equation. How you organize, how you think, what are the different processes you use, how do people communicate, they work together, everything has changed. And that's exactly what this track is all about. We have a fantastic lineup of Atlassians and our customers who are going to be talking about some of the best practices that we have experienced, they have experienced, things that you can continue doing, learn, take away, and hopefully you'll get something valuable out of each of these sessions. Now, before we get started, a few housekeeping things. Please silence your mobile phones. It's just out of respect for the speakers and for the other listeners in the room. And if you're walking in right now, and if you can all kind of scoot to the middle of the rows, especially where I see some empty spaces, because whoever is going to walk in can probably just slide in on the side, that would be great. And thank you all for being here on time. That's fantastic. And finally, if you haven't downloaded the Summit app, please do so, because right after each of these sessions, I'm going to request you to rate the experience that you had, give feedback to all of our speakers, because honestly, that's exactly how we improve. We want to do better every year. So this is one way for you to tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, so please do so. And with that, I'm going to call on stage our first set of speakers, Dave and Helen. Give it up. Woo! All right, now, before they get started, I want to tell you a few interesting things about these speakers, right? And they're actually laughing. I don't know why, really. There seems to be some sort of a rhythm here, because Dave loves dinosaurs. That's apparently his favorite animal. I have no idea why, but Helen loves dogs, and Dave loves donuts to eat. Did you grab a few right now before you walked in?
Kept it at one. I felt like.
Oh my God, no. Keeping away from your favorite. And then Helen loves ducks. That's her, any form of duck on her plate. That's awesome. And one thing that Dave wants to learn, a new skill, is he wants to be able to fly, and Helen wants to learn how to sew, which is awesome. And there was one thing which is, sorry. That was incorrect English. Yeah, definitely no. She doesn't want to sue anybody. And then Dave basically was apparently just 21 when he first attended his summit, and pretty much everybody was trying to get him drunk because he was 21. Has things much changed since then?
I like to think that I have a better time at every summit.
That's a very politically right answer. Thank you, Dave. And Helen is a huge fan of Kanye West, who she apparently ran into in Tokyo while she was shopping on a Wednesday. So we're going to hear you rap.
I wish, but I'm too Australian to actually rap authentically, so...
Next time, Helen, next time. All right, the stage is all yours.
Good day, everybody. I'm Dave Meyer.
And I'm Helen Scher. We're both product managers on the Jira Cloud team, and over the last 12 months, we've been working really hard on the parts of the redesigned Jira Cloud experience that you saw on stage at the keynote this morning. The investments we're making in simplifying Jira Cloud are the direct result of feedback we've received from everyone in the room. That's you guys, our customers. And we want to take the next 30 minutes to share with you the journey that our product management team went on to translate your feedback into the changes and the features that you see today.
So I'm going to start with a bold claim, not so bold claim. Great products need great feedback. And if you want to make a product that people love, you need to listen to them. And while Twitter is probably the first place that we frequently get feedback, it's far from the last. We get feedback talking to you at in-person events like this one, or in the support request that you file with our support team, we send you surveys, and obviously we collect heaps of in-product feedback also. We try to ignore the spelling errors and the unhelpful suggestions and the swear words and the intimations that we should fire our coworkers, which I'm sure are very well intentioned, but the reality is that most feedback sucks. And a lot of people will tell you that the reason that most feedback sucks is that customers cannot tell you what they need. They'll say, why bother? They'll usually make that reference to that Henry Ford analogy story about how they would have just gotten if he had asked people what they wanted, they would have just said a faster horse. And while we do want to make Jira into a faster horse, I don't think that's the right metaphor. The reality is that most enterprise software is hard to use because they rely on one type of feedback, and that's usually feature requests that come directly from customers. It usually looks something like this. You got a customer, and they say, I want this. And the salesperson wants the customer to be happy, so they'll buy more product, and so they'll say, that's a great idea. And then they fire it off to the product manager, and the product manager says, oh crap, how do I actually fit this into my roadmap? And then you come up with a bloated, cluttered product. And even if you have a more open system like Jira.Atlassian.com, like we use at Atlassian, it's easy to struggle with feature requests. What's wrong with feature requests? Well, first of all, there tend to be a lot of loudmouths in the room. Some of you might be the people in this room, and if that is you, I'm sorry. You can email me after. But you frequently have some people who create a lot of feature requests. They leave a lot of comments. It can be tempting to contort your roadmap to just make those people happy. And it's also difficult to communicate your priorities when customers just see a list of features. A list of features doesn't capture all the other things that you need to worry about as a product manager, like performance or fixing bugs or improving your design or trying to onboard new users. And then finally, it's not really holistic. The people that are adding feature requests already use your product. They want more. If you only listen to them, you might be missing the things that are keeping other people from getting started using your product at all. So today I want to talk about how Jira takes your feedback and turns it into the features and the other improvements that you see in the product. And so what does that process look like? It's a circle. Circle of brilliance. And really, it obviously starts, but we might have come up with the nice graphic afterwards, and we did not plan this out in the beginning, but it really does start with how we collect your feedback. We want you, our customers, to love our product, and we want to know that you know you love it. And luckily, there's an industry standard metric for measuring love. It's called NPS. Who's familiar with NPS? Yeah, all right, figured. But anyway, for the one person that's not familiar with NPS, basically what you do is you ask somebody how likely they are to recommend your product to a friend or colleague. Scale from 1 to 10. 9 or 10 are your promoters. 0 to 6 are your detractors. You subtract the detractors from the promoters. You end up with a score between -100 and +100, and that's your net promoter score. NPS is the #1 metric for product managers at Atlassian. We don't make decisions based on revenue or business value or sales or cost savings or engagement. We really, really focus, especially in product teams like Helen and I are on NPS. And that's because NPS drives everything else that we do. We can't be successful if our customers don't love our product. We ask people in all of our products every single day this question. The #1 defining characteristic of NPS feedback is that it comes directly from the users of our product. A lot of the other ways we get feedback tend to be one person speaking for a lot of other people. You say, I have my users want this, my users want that. But this ensures that we actually get that feedback from those users. But numbers don't tell you what you need to change. If NPS is our metric of customer sentiment, and our #1 goal is to improve our NPS score, we really need to practice NPS-driven development. We need to understand deeply what drives that NPS score. And so that's where categorization comes in. When we look at the feedback we receive on those NPS surveys, we get a lot of comments along with that score. And so we started to look at the recurring keywords that we saw in that feedback and then clustering those keywords into some general categories. So after a lot of iteration, we landed on 3. You'd have things like down for maintenance. That's more about reliability. feature requests like test case management, or just general, it's confusing, it's complicated, I can't keep track of everything. So reliability, functionality, RFU. Phew. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. Rough. There we go. So reliability is performance. Can we make it fast? Does it have a lot of downtime? Is Jira crashing a lot? Do users keep running into bugs? And R really comes first. Product managers don't like to hear it because we love building features. And marketing doesn't like to hear it because they love talking about those features. But honestly, if your product isn't up, it really doesn't matter which features it has. You need your customers to trust your product. So reliability really underpins everything else that we do. Usability is the next category. This covers users calling Jira confusing, perceiving that the product is complex, that they're getting lost in the product. And finally, functionality is probably what product managers typically think of first. This is actually new features. It's pretty easy to measure the product by the number of your features that you have, but that's not necessarily an equivalent of success. So in an ideal world, we would just, it's a Venn diagram, right? Find the things that land in the middle. But the best changes we would make probably don't exist. And that's why we have to focus on one kind of category at a time. Going back a couple years, one of our biggest concerns was reliability. Jira Cloud was too slow and it was down too often. So we invested significantly in improving performance, and we rebuilt a lot of infrastructure to make Jira more reliable. The announcements that you heard this morning are just the latest benefits of that ongoing investment in performance. And we've seen feedback. It's not great, and Jira definitely has a lot of room to improve, but it's definitely better. So that brings us to functionality. So I'm going to turn it over to Helen to explain what we looked at when we thought about functionality and then usability.
Thanks, Dave. Let's go. Okay, well, the answer came directly from you guys, our customers. So in fact, out of all the detractor NPS comments we received, around 3% explicitly complained about how Jira suffers from feature bloat and clutter. Even though every suggestion on jira.atlassian.com is about missing features, there was no single feature that came even close to the number of people saying that too many features in Jira was actually hurting their experience. So at the end of the day, customers are always going to want more features that solve their problems. That's why they're paying for your product, right? But if customers can't actually use the features that are already in your product, what is the point of adding new ones? That really leaves us with usability as the #1 priority area for the Jira team to tackle. But everybody knows Jira is a massive product, and we can't solve every usability problem at once. We needed a way of prioritizing all the feedback that we receive. And we quickly realized that this process is actually more difficult than it sounds, especially when the bulk of the feedback you get is, Jira is too confusing and really difficult to use. Because why? Why is Jira confusing? Before you can do anything to fix the problems, you need to understand exactly what your users are talking about when they give you feedback. So at Atlassian, we came up with a systematic approach to prioritizing usability feedback. We took all of the detractor NPS comments we received, dumped them in a spreadsheet, and we focused only on the negative comments because while we really appreciate the promoter comments and the compliments we get, they're not the ones that are going to help us do our jobs better. And detractors are the users that suffer the most pain and leave your product. Sorry. Okay, so here's the approach we adopted. First, you want to separate the feedback you get from users from bigger and smaller organizations. By segmenting based on different numbers of users, we found that smaller customers often come to Jira from other lightweight products like Trello, so sometimes they struggle the most with onboarding and setting Jira up. On the other hand, bigger customers often have a harder time navigating their work and finding things in a bigger Jira instance. So understanding the different needs of your customers forces you to solve usability issues in a way that scales to organizations of all sizes. The second step might be really painfully obvious, but make sure you actually take the time to read the comment in its full context. You may find that some comments aren't very useful if it's just a customer saying, I hate this, and the UI is really confusing, But most of the time, if you just take a second longer to read the comment in its entirety, there will be something that will tip you off about the particular usability problem that the user is really struggling with. And from this comment, you should be able to appoint an owner for this particular piece of work. For example, we could tell at a glance in Jira whether the usability feedback was a feature that was more Jira software specific or a more generic Jira platform problem that affected all the Jira products in the family. And make sure you're really specific when you designate ownership, otherwise the feedback is unlikely to be read or used by the relevant team. And finally, the most important step is breaking down the comment into specific themes and categories. Use keywords and clustering to help you identify the recurring themes. And some of our biggest themes on Jira included things like configuration, navigation, searching, and filtering. This will help you get a snapshot of the biggest pain points at a glance. And unfortunately, this process was pretty manual for us. For example here, the user is telling us that they have a hard time finding anything on Jira. And this can go into a generic Jira search category. And they're also saying that they're taking too many steps to complete a task, and this can go into a general navigation category. And finally, difficulties in creating editing Jira issues also gets its own theme. So keyword segmentation just comes down to reading the full comment, really trying to understand and break down what the user's trying to tell you, and identifying the main themes and journeys. And at Atlassian, we ended up with multiple epic spreadsheets that look something like this. So really, get out there and hire an intern to do this for you. Because at Atlassian, we get 6,000 commented pieces of NPS feedback a month. That's roughly 200 comments a day. So really, we need to hire lots of interns to do this for us. And I know you're dying to know what we actually found out from doing this rather painful exercise, so I'll share the results with you. Once we finished reading and categorizing all the NPS comments, we found that overall, general navigation and administration configuration were the top 2 usability problem areas in Jira. Difficulties in creating and editing Jira issues was third, followed closely by Jira's steep learning curve and search capabilities. We confirmed this when we looked at usability themes across teams of all sizes. General navigation, administration, configuration, and creating, editing Jira issues still were the highest impact usability themes. And in contrast, onboarding was not very painful for larger customers, partly because they have dedicated Jira admins like yourselves. And searching Jira issues wasn't very painful for smaller customers because they're more likely to have a smaller instance. And this is how we identified the high impact areas with the best return on investment that will make Jira better for everybody. Doing the NPS segmentation exercise told us where we needed to concentrate our efforts for the immediate future. So now, armed with what we believed were the biggest usability problems in Jira, we needed to actually go out and sanity check this with real customers. So we went out there and we tried to validate our assumptions with some of our largest and our smaller customers before building out high-fidelity prototypes. And it's important when you're at this stage to realize that you're trying to validate a concept. The primary goal is that you're designing a solution that is going to effectively solve the problem for every segment of your user base. For example, it's really easy to fall into a trap where you over-optimize for your newer, smaller customers. They're typically more willing to embrace the simple design that you're trying to provide. So it's really critical to stress test your designs with your largest customers to gauge whether your design will scale to meet their requirements. And similarly, you might find bias when you're testing only with your existing customers. If you're just testing with people who already figured out how to use your product, you might be blind to things that are really hindering adoption. So we went out there and we tested specifically with people who were not our customers to try and understand someone who had never seen Jira before, how they would react. We also bribed them with gift cards, by the way. And we found out that paying people to use your product is a very expensive way to acquire your customers, but it's a very cheap way to make sure that your design is effective. And finally, it's important to realize that once you have a clear enough idea of the direction that you want your team to take, that you go out there and that your tests are actually valid, because when we've done extensive user testing and then we change direction for some reason, that's invalidated all of our previous tests. So make sure your prototypes are as faithful to your final design as possible. The closer you can get to a realistic prototype, the better. And on Jira, we develop prototypes for the navigation experience that you see in Jira Cloud today. We started testing them almost a year ago. So this is a prototype that we actually went and put in front of our customers versus the final design that we shipped. And again, our prototype for the new Jira search experience used high-fidelity designs, which closely resembled the final experience that made it into product. But how do you know if the changes you have made to your product has actually made a difference? We introduced this concept of scorecarding on Jira as a way of keeping us, the product managers, honest, and make sure that we're actually making changes that are meaningful and impactful to our users. And one of the changes that we first tackled was this page, and this is part of the new Jira configuration experience. I'm sure you've seen this page before because this is actually the most used page in Jira settings. We focused on a couple of improvements here. Previously, the table was organized so that if you had someone who had more than one role, they showed up multiple times on a page. So if you remove the user from the role, it wasn't clear whether they might have other project permissions or access still. Now, each user shows up only once in the table, and you can see all of their permissions at a glance. And can anyone tell me what the main purpose of this page is? It's actually to add users to a role. It's not really apparent, is it? So we went and made this main task much bigger and brighter, so it's much more obvious to the user. And additionally, you can now find users within a drop-down dialog, and you can enroll multiple users or groups in a role at once. And now that your new project members have been added to your project, you can clearly see who is enrolled in what role on the people page. And now that we have the new designs, we want to make sure that we're making an improvement on today's existing Jira experience. So now I'm going to talk about the concrete ways we measure design, using the people experience I just showed you as an example. So we created this thing called a UX scorecard for the people page. A scorecard is basically just a table of metrics that you want to move and measure. Each scorecard should be unique because every user experience is different. Now let's take a look at the details close up. For every scorecard, it's really important that you establish different scores for both new and existing users. We tested our actual designs with both current users and people who don't use the product for the same reasons we validated our early prototypes with them. Your existing customers have prior experience and a mental model of how the product works today. What makes sense to them might be totally confusing for new users, so you should always separate the two groups. First, you need to find out what the baseline is for your product. The baselining is just a fancy term for your existing product experience. Without it, you won't be able to figure out whether you're actually making any improvements over the existing experience. So for the new people page, there were two things that we cared about. We wanted to know if our users could complete the main task at hand, which is adding a person to the project, and we also wanted to know how long it took them to complete this task. So using the old users and roles page, when we tested with new users, we found that only 60% of new users could figure out how to add someone to a project. When we tested the new designs, we could immediately see improvements in these two metrics for both new and existing users. More than 90% of our users could now complete the task in a shorter amount of time. And finally, we introduced this metric called UX Lite in all of our products. It sounds really complicated, but UX Lite is a lightweight, industry-standard tool that allows you to easily measure the perceived usability of any software system. And despite its complicated-sounding name, it's really just two questions that asks your users, does the product meet your needs? And was the product easy to use? And here you can see how the survey works in product. We also added an open text section so the user can tell us why behind each score. And like NPS, we have now deployed UX Lite surveys across all of our products at Atlassian, so we have a consistent usability metric across the entire company. Now, I'm not a designer, so if you're interested in diving deeper into how we test our designs, set up scorecards, and implement UX testing, two of Atlassian's star designers are speaking later today about exactly this. So please turn up at room 211A at 4:50 today so we can get our referral bonus from these guys. Okay, and there you have it. Your product priorities, the prototypes, and your scorecards will definitely look different to the ones we used on Jira today. So the most important part is finding the right processes and finding the right set of metrics for your product. And now I'm going to hand back to Dave to talk about how we actually got this stuff built.
Thank you, Helen. Ashley, the designer who's speaking later today, she was the same designer who was up showing off all the new Jira designs during the Summit keynote today, so seriously, don't miss that session. Implementing these changes definitely wasn't fast. We're making some pretty substantial changes that affect every single Jira Cloud user, so it was important that we go through a lot of process to make sure that we were building the right thing before we started development. But when we started working on updating something like the project creation dialog, we knew that we were going from something like this to something like this. It's a pretty significant change for our users. And having that scorecard really helped us focus, but it also guided our development process. We knew from that scorecard that there was actually one metric in the new experience that performed worse, and that was the actual amount of time that it took users to create the task at hand, which in this case was creating the project. And we had some theories for why this was, but we wanted to make sure that they were backed up by data. So throughout the whole experience, we added counters that were measuring the amount of time from when a user first clicked the button to when they saw this first screen to when they went into the template selector or saw each new template preview while they were typing in the project name. And then finally, we added it all up, and it gets sent as analytics data that goes back into Jira, and we can see how long each step was taking our users, so we can match up the experiences that we saw in the usability testing with the data that we have from usage in the product. But it's one thing to implement measurements. It's another thing to actually make sure that those measurements actually flow back into your development process. A great example of this comes from the work that we did redesigning the issue view, which you also saw in the keynote today, and hopefully have already seen rolling out to your boards in Jira Core and Kanban boards in Jira Software. So the new issue details replaces the sidebar that you've seen before on the right side when you click an issue. And you get a nice new, we knew that one of the areas of usability that people struggle with the most is getting the right amount of detail on an issue. So we've been working on this new design, which brings all the issue details together in a nice new modal type view. And this modal type view actually creates a perfect natural experiment for us to test. We've been progressively adding more and more functionality into that dialogue, but we don't have everything yet. But we actually have a nice experiment where users can click through from that dialogue to the full normal view issue page that you know and love, maybe don't love. But when a user goes from the dialogue onto this page, we can track exactly what their next action is. So we could see that the number one thing that people were doing when they click through is transitioning issues. Not a surprise, to be honest. And so if you look closely, that's the number one thing that we started working on after we rolled out the initial versions of this feature. And you can see actually the top 8 things that are on this list are the 8 features that we have built into the modal as of today. Except for work logging, which is, you can probably guess what we're working on right now. Fundamentally, the point I want to make is that a chart like this one is a lot more useful to make product decisions than feedback like this. Turning feedback into data has definitely driven a lot of the improvements that we've made in Jira in the last 12 months, and will continue to drive our work over the next 12 months. We're nowhere close to being done.
So finally, to wrap up, it's a really long road that we're on to improve the usability of Jira. We hope you've seen how these new techniques we've used, like in-product surveys, UX scorecard, and changes to how we implement and collect data, help us ensure that the changes we're making are the right ones, and that we're actually making Jira Cloud easier to use for everybody. We know it's a really long and epic journey, but we're really, really excited that these changes are making it into Jira Cloud, and we really can't wait to hear what you think. So have a great rest of Summit. Please come and talk to Dave and I at the Jira Core and Jira Software booths. We'll love to chat to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.